I want to show you a landmark here on Flatbush Avenue. Actually, I'm holding up a picture of the interior of the great Loew's Kings. Loew's Kings Theater opened in 1929 as one of those wonder theaters. Seat over a couple thousand people. I think today it seats about 1,845 because they renovated the interior in 2015, and it was closed in 1977 because of poor economics, and it was lovingly restored, and now they have great events here again. It was designed by Rapp and Rapp. They were noted theater architects. There were 5 wonder theaters like the Loew's Alhambra and Loew's Jersey City, and we didn't say Loew's, we said Loewy's, okay? We're going to Loewy's. So the Flatbush Avenue had all the commercial and entertainment facilities. There were other movies here in the neighborhood too, the Albemarle and the Kenmore, but this is the grandest one of all of them, the Loew's Kings, and it's been lovingly restored, and you see all that wonderful terracotta over the marquee entrance. Also, further down to the right, the Astoria Savings Bank from 1926, a big monumental bank building on the corner, and then there's a lovely surprise around the corner of the old Brooklyn Union Gas Company sales offices and headquarters. So Flatbush Avenue is still a very vibrant thoroughfare. It's your main line of communication from the old Dutch town of Breukelen, down by the Brooklyn waterfront. Then Flatbush would be settled by the 1850s, 1852. It would have a charter, and the charter for the village of Flatbush was much further up the street, several blocks, by Church Avenue, and I'll talk more about that when we go up to the next corner. The tower you're seeing way in the distance is the 1920s addition to the Erasmus Hall High School. Erasmus Hall High School was the first secondary school in New York State and probably the second one in the country. The picture you're looking at is the original building from 1786. It was founded just 3 years after our independence, War of Independence was over in 1783. And it was founded by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and Aaron Burr to be a secondary school rather than just a primary school, and it was the first one in New York State and probably the second one in the country. By the 1920s, around this building would be built this Tudor revival, Tudor Gothic revival of the high school that was now called Erasmus High School, after the Dutch humanist Erasmus, originally back from the 1700s. That 1786 Federal Georgian Revival building still exists in the courtyard of this now 1920s Tudor Gothic Revival school complex that was designed by C.B.J. Snyder, who was the city architect who did dozens, if not hundreds, of public schools around the metropolitan area. It's a very noted high school because of all its wonderful students, and I'm going to name just a few. The original Erasmus Hall was given the land to be built on by the Dutch Reformed Church that I'll just get to in a moment, but to not forget about who went to this school, well, we all know about Barbara Streisand, okay? And she was also an usher here at the Loew's Kings, just that we had shown you a moment ago. So Barbara Streisand went here, Neil Diamond, Barry Manilow. You had people like Beverly Sills that attended here. You had even people like Susan Hayward and Mae West, Mickey Spillane, the author, Bobby Fischer, the chess champion. So I don't think there's any other school in Brooklyn that can claim all these famous students. Now this is Flatbush, and you're on Flatbush Avenue. Flatbush Avenue is one of the longest streets in Brooklyn, and it's a very busy, still commercial thoroughfare, and it takes you all the way from downtown Brooklyn all the way out to the Rockaways, to Reese Park. So it literally divides Brooklyn in half, but Flatbush is composed of many different neighborhoods. The settlement of Flatbush starts a few blocks up on the juncture of what is now Flatbush Avenue and Church Avenue because of the Dutch Reformed Church. The Dutch Reformed Church is directly across the street from Erasmus Hall High School. As I mentioned, the Dutch Reformed Church back in the 1700s gave the land for Erasmus Hall to be built on. So this is the third Dutch Reformed Church on that site. This is from 1798. There were two prior churches. Flatbush was given a charter in 1652, and in 1654, that first church would be built on that site. Then there would be a second church, and this is the third. So this is probably the oldest continuously occupied religious site in New York City. Going back to the Dutch days, this was one of the 5 original Dutch towns, along with the English settlement of Gravesend, that would become the city of Brooklyn. Flatbush was a separate entity until 1894, when it would be consolidated into the city of Brooklyn, and then the city of Brooklyn was consolidated into the city of New York in 1898. So all these areas basically came together to be more developed as public transportation came through here. I mentioned the car line back in the late 1800s that went down Nostrand Avenue, right by where that St. Jerome's church that we're going to see later is, and also that there was transportation with the Flatbush and Coney Island Railroad that is now the Brighton line, or the Q and the B. Who knows where the Q and the B go, but it was the Brighton line that by the early 1900s would be incorporated into the subway system. So that really brought people out here to these wonderful, suburban areas. So it's a wonderful cosmopolitan area of all these, neighborhoods. And Flatbush is one of the oldest settled neighborhoods in New York City, going back to the 1600s. Looking behind me at this wonderful ornate building with the beautiful brickwork and that classic top cornice and balustrade, and all the wonderful treatment of the columns on the first floor with the large windows, you can see it was a large commercial building. It was the Brooklyn Union Gas Company, the utility, in 1930-1931. For this area here in Brooklyn, they would be a place where they had their offices for the utility, but also where they would have stoves and other utilities that would use gas for sale. And they would also demonstrate how to use these newfangled contraptions back in the 1930s. So they'd have classes, they'd have events to teach people all about the new appliances that they could have, and it's a good way of doing business. So they also had public events, and they had shows, and they had an art gallery there as well too. And by the 1960s, it would be taken over by Loehmann's. Loehmann's was a fashion for women place where they had all discount name brands and fashions and such, and end-of-line clothing. And Loehmann's was a legend here in New York, and especially here in Brooklyn. This was a Loehmann's until the 1990s when it closed, and now the building is being used for social services. So it's a continuous use of a wonderful classical building, and I'm glad it's being used because it is not a landmark as far as I know, but it certainly should be a landmark, just like the Sears building a block away. Now we're going to go over and take a look at the monumental Sears Roebuck store, the first one in Brooklyn, a monumental piece of Art Deco architecture, and I'll tell you a little story about it when we get over there. Okay, you're looking at the wonderful 1932 Sears Roebuck store, the first one in Brooklyn, major building. When here, this part of central Brooklyn had a wonderful shopping center, an area concentrated basically on and off Flatbush Avenue. So this store was designed to have people come by car. You'll see the big parking lot later. But the corner tower was really predominant in the neighborhood. It's like a church tower. It announces itself. It says, "Here I am. Come in, look at me." when it was opening. Remember, this is the height of the Depression. So new buildings, and people need services, and they need all the different housewares and utilities and things, stoves and refrigerators and new washing machines and things for all their homes in the neighborhood, and Sears would provide that. So they had this big store here, trying to spur development at the time of economic crises of the Depression. So to make note of it, Eleanor Roosevelt came here on the opening in 1932, and she made her opening remarks, and she even made the first purchase, a little pair of booties. So there you have it, the First Lady of the country coming here to identify with people's needs at the time of the Depression. Just to emphasize the low-rise scale of the buildings, in particular right here where Sears is, right off Beverly Road and off Bedford Avenue. And Bedford Avenue is the longest street in Brooklyn, actually, so it has a prominent location. But around it in the early 1900s would be these wonderful one-family houses that would be built, and they would be able to get all their supplies and needs right from Sears over here or from all the shopping on Flatbush Avenue. This East Flatbush, a lot of it was built after the Victorian mansions of the Prospect Park South and the other neighborhoods south of Prospect Park. This eastern part of East Flatbush was mostly a lot of these two-family and then smaller apartment houses. You'll get to see the parking lot, which today they're using for coronavirus testing. You can drive into the parking lot and get tested, so it's good they have this big open space here. And they started that already during the beginning of the pandemic in April, when the store officially closed. Now we're going to actually get to meet one of the movers and shakers on the block, and we're going to actually get to go inside of her home and see what it looks like. Hey, Julia.
Hey, John.
How are you? Come on down. Okay, isn't this beautiful? Look at the front yard. This is one of the typical front yards. Maybe not, maybe it's a little bit more elaborate than some of the others, but you get the idea of what they're doing here with all the plantings as much as possible, beautifully displayed and all. So I think it's very, very appropriate that they received, how many times, Julia, the award?
4 times the first place win.
Pleasure to be in your home, Julia.
Thank you so much.
And I'd like to introduce you because you have such an important place in this community. You were the president of the Block Association at one point?
Yes, I was in 2019.
And now you are?
I am the landmark chair of the East 25th Street Historic District Initiative.
Okay, is that what the button is there?
The button, this is to garner support for our campaign.
Okay.
That is support East 25th Street proposed historic district. So we're hoping that the landmarks will make us a historic district.
Okay, well, it's in process, and it's in good process right now.
Yes,
So you've
yes.
had your hearing already, so that's a
Absolutely.
good thing. But the reason why, besides the exterior of the block, it's the block is so house proud.
Yes.
And it's house proud not only because of what you do with the gardening and the exterior and the way the street is beautifully laid out and maintained, it's because what you have in your homes.
Yes.
These homes were built between 1909 and 1912 by a Henry Meyer.
Yes.
And he actually had a millwork that would do trim and such, and you can see a lot of the beautiful detail in the house, especially look at the fireplace and the beautiful inlaid tile, okay, and the mantelpiece here. And then the woodwork that surrounds all the doors and the wood paneling in the base of the walls, the grand staircase coming down. So when you come down the staircase, you can look out and see your guests waiting for you here. And then when you entertain royally, you have this magnificent dining room with the great double doors with all the wonderful leaded glass colored paneling. And then when you come into the dining room, you have this wonderful paneled room with all of the plate rail and the beam ceiling.
Yes.
And there's also an added elegance to these houses too, because they have a back bay. Not only a front bay, but the back bay to allow a little bit more light and visual up and down. So it's very comfortable to live here, I'm sure.
It is. It's wonderful.
How long have you lived in the house?
August of 2013 is when we moved here.
Okay, about 7 years.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. Right away, my neighbors, embraced us, and my children, they were a part of like the non-for-profit that's an arm of the Block Association.
Yes.
And it's been absolutely phenomenal. We have stoop night events and block parties and all sorts of events just to get folks together and you know, feel like a sense of community.
A real sense of community where you involved yourself with the neighbors, not just to say hi, but doing so many events as well, too.
Absolutely.
Well, that's solidarity. And if every block would do that, we'd have a wonderful world, wouldn't we?
Absolutely.
So it's a magnificent dining room where you can entertain 10 or 12 people. And it's right off the kitchen, very practical, too.
The first gift to this house was this chandelier. I was absolutely obsessed with it. It's from Restoration Hardware. And what I love so much is that it married the old and the new. So you had the old type of chandelier in the inside, but then you have like a modern piece, a little rustic, a little edgy on the outside. And I just felt that, you know, there's a certain harmony when you have things that are round. And so that's something I fell in love with. So that was the first gift to the house. But then also I installed these lightings here in the chair, in the plate rail. And that was meant for fun, you know, for the holidays. We changed the colors. For the different kids' birthdays, we changed the colors based on the mood. And it's been really fun to have, and it kind of sets the tone of something, you know, nice, whatever type of event you're going to have. Just sets a really nice tone, and of course, you know, plenty of food.
Yes, and you can show off your nice china in the china closets over there in the corner too, right?
Yes, in here, I actually have my wedding china. That, it's nice to be able to not just have it and you know, and look at it. Of course, it looks beautiful in this, you know, in this old cabinet, but also being able to use it, you know.
That's right. It's very practical. We have gifts, and we use them, and we make them come alive again.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Every house has a backyard, and you see the nice rhythm also of the back bays to the houses as well. Wow, we're enjoying your beautiful block.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and we're being photographed for the Historic Districts Council 6 to celebrate designation that you have already, and looking forward to your landmarking status soon. Hi, good morning. Wow, and you are some of the ladies responsible for all this beauty on the block and keeping it together, huh?
Yes.
Wow, okay. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Joe. I'm the tour guide with the Historic Districts Council. And it's been a pleasure to work with Julia on planning this tour and getting it out there so everybody can hear and see what beautiful things you have on this special block. Yes. So wonderful. Now, how long have you been involved with the gardening?
At least 20 years.
At least 20 years?
When the Greenest Block started, right?
Yeah.
When the first started with you got involved with the Brooklyn Botanical Garden right away?
Yep.
Okay, and I can see you've been going on and on and on. There's so much is there anything that you don't have a place that you don't garden? I mean, on the pots.
Every nook and cranny.
That's wonderful.
This is her garden.
Okay.
That's
Hi.
That's
Good to see you.
That's hers.
Wonderful. We have another gardener sitting here comfortably with the friend.
Her dog.
And I'm amazed at the trees that you got even growing in the front yards in places. So
And we lost a few.
you lost a few with the wind, but then I'm sure you always have plans to put in more, right?
Of course.
Wherever you can. Of course you do. As we'll walk up and down the street, you'll see there are limestones, there are brownstones and limestones, so you have this nice variation of a general theme that unifies everything.
Yeah.
And then everybody seems to be so house proud too, with all the way you take care of everything, right? It's a wonderful.
It's a family.
We love these little old houses.
It's a family.
Fine with some
You know, you said it. The family. These are family homes, and they were designed to be a family home, and a family home for generations. So as time passes and generations and such move on, we are the good stewards to take care of these buildings and keep them for our families or for whomever we will pass them on to. And that's what good architecture is about. Something that's going to last and it's timeless.
And considering COVID, we didn't do too much this year.
Yeah, that's what everybody couldn't get. But at least you had your own little spaces
Yes.
that you could come out to.
Yes.
A lot of us in apartments, I got to lean out the window, you know. So each little place sometimes is like its own little botanical garden.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
If I pass and I see her with something that I like, or her, we get a piece.
You get
we
your
share.
share, and that's what the neighbors are about. Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful.
Open the door. Open the door and let the lady in.
And you have the original doors too. She has the original fireplace cover with the beautiful detail. And very nice. And you put in the tin ceiling.
No, the tin ceiling was here.
It was there, so it worked perfectly. It gives you the old touch still. And look at the panels in the doorway as well too. Oh my gosh. Wow. This is incredible. Look at this. They're allegorical stories of somebody traveling, working in a mine or such here, and look at all this.
I think they're harvesting wheat or
Right.
something
Oh.
they're harvesting.
Yeah, looks like they're pulling something in a cart over here. They're working the land, they're plowing. And that's all much of the fruit of the earth for a dining room. You know, very appropriate. Where you're serving wonderful meals, you have that allegory about where the food comes from.
And the ceiling here is all original. Everything here is original, paneling and everything.
Wow.
The bench that I have some of my plants on right there.
Yes.
The bench over there.
That was a built-in, yes.
It's a built-in bench.
Fantastic. And fabulous. And you can see the depth of the backyards because the properties are all, I think, 20 by 100. And they're backyards to the backyards of the next block of 26th Street. And I think those were Meyer's buildings too, weren't they, Julia? They were built by Henry Meyer. So this spatial relationship of the backyards gives this great depth behind all these houses on the street. These are like little paradises when you consider the whole backyards collectivized together and everybody has their individual space, but they have that openness and light and air. Very good planning.
So I have romaine lettuce on the table.
Okay.
And I have the red lettuce on there.
I think we're staying for lunch.
Why not? I can make you salad.
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you.
When they were building, they built with a purpose and a meaning.
Yes.
And even the material they use, because some of the material they're using today doesn't last.
It's unusual that they put that limestone in the middle there.
That is, you know what the joke is? That's actually a brownstone.
Oh, and they painted it over.
This was,
I found it like that when I came.
Okay, no, because that's usually what it was. You see the brownstones here, the series of them, okay, you know, and then there would be the balance on this side, and the same thing going down with the limestones on both sides to break up, you know, the idea of just having a total brownstone block or a total limestone block. You can just see, even from the plantings on the street, they just come over the sidewalk a bit as well.
I want to say hello.
And right, they want to say hello, as well as reaching out from the fence itself in places.
Yep.
I love it. Flowers are the music of the ground, from earth's lips, spoken with sound. There's a little poetry right there. Isn't that beautiful? These individual touches that people add. Mhm. Thank you so much, Julia,
Thank
for
you so
showing
much,
us your
Joe.
block and introducing us to your neighbors and taking us into your homes. I mean, this is really Brooklyn hospitality at its best.
You see?
Okay?
One of our signs here again.
Oh, okay. You gotta keep your maintenance going, huh?
Happiness blooms from within.
That's true.
Happiness blooms from within, and we got another one right here.
Well, this is what's great. Everybody helps each other and keeps the place going, huh?
Walk softly and listen, for the nature is at work.
This This building, 310 East 25th, it actually was not built the same time as the 56 brownstones and limestones.
It was built later.
It was built later, but it looks so beautiful because it has such detail in the brickwork that you see, and also you can see like the shield that's in there, like a crest or something.
Yeah, the panel that says New Rochelle, it tells the name of a building. You want to be in a building that has a noted name, so it makes you have a good identity. All the good brickwork and everything. And this is what happens after a block like this is designed, when there are more working class people coming in, because the block that Henry Meyer designed was for middle class. And by another decade or so, by the 19-teens and 20s, the neighborhood was getting more working class.
Yes.
So that they needed to put more housing in. They built apartments, and very stylish apartments like you see, like this one. And in the 1920s all the way through the 1940s, all the vacant lots that would have normally had row houses are now having multiple dwellings on them. And this, to me, should be included in your landmark district, because it is an architecturally notable building. You know, this is not, but this side is. So, you know, it's how do you expand your district? Henry Meyer had done a wonderful job with this block, which is why, as you have seen already, it should be preserved by the quality of the block and the, of course, involvement of all the people, the wonderful, this sort of Renaissance revival buildings done in alternative groups of limestone and brownstone, some with different cornices, whether they're rounded or angled, and all of them have some little individual detail on them from the next, whether it's the door lintel cover or a banding on the building between the windows, yet they all are so harmonious together.
Yeah.
And that was the idea of very good design. So Meyer left this in perpetuity of a good design which has been maintained through the generations and the various different groups of people that have lived here. And now, thanks to the wonderful involvement of the people understanding the architecture, that they want to preserve it, and they're beautifying it all along. For how many years now? You've been involved since the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens got involved with their Best Block in Brooklyn award.
Greenest Block in Brooklyn.
The Greenest Block in Brooklyn. So that's yours, right?
Yes.
That's wonderful. So that was it. So now we've seen this wonderful, you know, oasis here, and now we're going to go take a look at just a little bit of the surrounding area. Okay, and thanks to Julia, she's going to give us a little bit extra right now. Okay? Okay, these two buildings that we're looking at, a line of about 4 of them, were done late 1890s, early 1900s as a one-family type dwelling with a high stoop to take you up to the parlor floor and an extra floor above, and then a walk-in where they had the original kitchens and dining rooms. Now this is very unusual, this kind of elaborate treatment of the stonework over the entrances. Look at all that stonework over the entrances and the windows. So elaborate and so rich in that, you know, wonderful articulated Beaux-Arts style. But very unusual. I have not seen the treatment of houses like this almost anywhere in the city. We're going to walk around the corner and see some more of that, and then Julia's going to show us a special building. As you can see the brickwork before it was painted, or if it's painted, it's still kind of more in keeping with the original color of the brick. And these were built a little bit lower scale rather than they're 1 floor less than the ones around on the avenue. But again, these were built originally as one-family houses. Very unusual, that elaborate treatment for the windows and doors. Yeah, the corner house has the stained glass. You can actually see some of the beautiful leaded glass in the windows that probably were where the original dining room was. Because if these were built as a 3-family, this one, that would have been probably the dining room in the back, where they would have had the buffet underneath that stained glass window, because the kitchen would have been next to it. So this was built as like a 3-family house on the corner. It was a little larger. But again, beautiful banded brickwork and wonderful, you know, this neoclassic detail treatment of the window framings. Behind us here is one of those special buildings that Julia discovered, and she wanted us to see this because it does show us something different about the neighborhood and what it used to be. It was, from what I can tell by looking at the form of it with that widow's walk on the top, it was probably about 1870s or something in that period,
Yes.
like post-Civil War. What do you know about the building, Julia?
So it's so interesting because this building, it looks like nothing else in Flatbush. There's no other home that kind of has that cupola on top.
Yes.
With the curved windows.
Yeah.
Which kind of shows that it's Italianate. But also, it's that it had different addresses to that building.
Different addresses, really?
Yeah. Which
You
is
saw old maps, I guess, huh?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is that this house was built, like you said, in around the 1870s.
Yes.
However, it was built on Lot Street, which is
This
Lot
is
Street,
Little Lot Street, yes.
but then the road to Canarsie Road.
The road was called Canarsie Road.
Yeah.
So was it one of the old roads way back from the colonial, well, you know, from
Yes.
the days of the 1800s?
Yes, absolutely.
When all this was actually the Vanderveer Farm, I believe, or your block was the Vanderveer Farm,
Yeah.
before Henry Mayer got the property and made it into the wonderful building block street that you have. So this was probably part of that farm. There was a big farm. The Vanderveers were, you know, very good, wealthy landowners here as well too. So maybe it was part of their family. I don't know. Did you see any names attached to the people who lived here?
I don't think it was the Vanderveers.
All right.
But what's really interesting is the fact that it was further in a different street, and
The house was in a different. It wasn't here.
Yeah, it wasn't actually here
On the map.
Yeah, and so it later showed up on maps around 1920s, 1925, around that time.
Yeah.
And so what is alleged maybe is that the house was actually moved so that the original lot to where it was, that they could actually develop more two-family brick homes at further down on Lot Street.
But at the same point, they decided they were going to save this house rather than tear it down, which is what they did to most of the old manor houses or farmhouses that used to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to me, I think it's an absolute treasure because it's so unique to Flatbush.
It is, and I'm so glad you pointed it out. You can see it's been modified quite a bit because it's all stuccoed over rather than having, you know, the original siding or framing. But the wonderful window treatments you can see are still there by the roof lines of the windows and the roof line of the house in general. It's a wonderful kind of Italianate villa style. And the porches probably were at one point an open veranda before they were enclosed. Thank you, Julia. You
My
gave us something
pleasure.
extra besides all the wonderful things on your street.
Thank you.
So thank you. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. Okay, well, here we are on Newkirk Avenue and East 28th Street. We had come from that beautiful block of East 25th Street that we looked at, that's in the process of getting landmarked. We passed by a few other blocks that had a lot of wonderful row house architecture as well. And now, of course, the reasons with all these wonderful homes and streets is that the congregations that would be living here would build their own churches, their own religious facilities. And right here on the corner we have one, and another 2 blocks down we have another, which I will talk about in a moment. St. Stephen's Lutheran Church was founded in 1898 as the neighborhood was starting to get established. And it was founded for Irish Lutherans. There were a lot of Irish and a lot of English and people who spoke, you know, English as far as their native background. There was a German Lutheran Church further up that I will the Lutheran Church, the German Lutheran, was about a mile away from here. So this was an English-speaking Lutheran church, but architecture has kind of changed already. Founded in 1898, but the first church would open in 1900. And you can see the back portion of the church with the cross on it. That was part of the original 1900 church. By 1914, they would expand the church with the larger facade and tower with the cross. Because the congregation was larger, they needed that, so they expanded the church. The first pastor that came here was a Pastor Gable. And Pastor Gable was fresh out of the Philadelphia seminary. And he was told to go establish a parish in the cornfields of Brooklyn. These were all cornfields and farms, basically, in the latter part of the 1800s, until developers would get them, as we pointed out where we were on the block before, and then they would build sections of houses, streets and such, and the streets again would become populated with mostly people who are now seeking a kind of middle-class life. So the church not only had its own facility in the church, but we're going to walk further down and we're going to see where the church house is. And that's a lovely building with some beautiful details too. And I got inside the church on a personal note back in 1993, because one of my dear friends from my old Sunset Park neighborhood, a Pastor Joseph Combs, who was the pastor of the German Evangelical Lutheran Church that was still a little bit German in Sunset Park, would now be invested as the pastor of this church for 7 years until the year 2000, when now his mission is now in South Florida. So the church has a very lovely, delicate interior, and it's basically a church that hasn't changed much since that 1914 addition that made it larger. Let's go take a look at the church house. You see, St. Stephen's is still in kind of that pared down English Gothic, although it's been stuccoed from the exteriors. On the left, these buildings from the 1960s and then renovated later in the 1970s were the schoolroom facilities for the church. The Catholic churches, of course, had their great parochial schools, but so did the Lutherans, and so did the Episcopals, and so did the Methodists have their own schools. I think the school closed probably in the early 2000s. Let's cross and take a look at some of the detail in the beautiful 1920s sort of Tudor revival church house next to the church. I'm going to talk about its Tudor Gothic detail with that smaller, lower Gothic arch to the entrance to the church house, the mid-1920s. And it connects to the church here too. And the way the windows are arranged, and if you look at it, it almost looks like an English Jacobean manor house. But it was the church house with services and extra meeting rooms and such. So that's where they would do the church offices and such in that house. The pastor's house was on another street a few blocks away from here. Now we're going to go to St. Jerome's, just another block or so away, and see a very unusual church architecture style. By the way, across the street from the church, you see this lovely row of what were originally one-family houses with little gardens. You look further up the street, over to the right, up East 29th Street, and you'll see some more of the wonderful one-family houses with beautiful cornices and nice stoops going up. And these rows of houses continue again down Newkirk Avenue here to the next block to Nostrand Avenue. So we're going to take a look. Behind you, or behind me actually now, is one of the apartment houses that would be built in after the one-family row houses of the early 1900s stopped, because more working-class people were coming here and land was so valuable that between the 19-teens and 1940s, all the empty lots were mostly filled in with 4 to 6 story apartment houses of various revival styles. This is in a colonial revival style. Beautiful brickwork on the house. So it's a lovely building, and there's many dozens and hundreds actually throughout New York that look like that. We're going to now take a look at the wonderful complex of St. Jerome's. Just 1 block away from St. Stephen's, you see now the back of St. Jerome's. It consists in the back here, this is the rectory or the church house, and then the other building further down is the school. It's a large complex. The church is a large church building that has this kind of castellated effect to it. You wouldn't imagine seeing a church that looks like a castle, but you will see a lot more of that when we go around to the front facade of the church. Okay, this is a Roman Catholic church, started in 1901. So let's continue now to see the front of the church. Yeah, 1901, Pastor Lynch, another young minister, comes out here to start an Irish Catholic church. And it was built in this unusual kind of style with those towers that look like it's a castle. At first, when I was from far away, I thought it looked like it was an armory. It was sort of fortified, but I guess it's kind of a fortification of God and spirituality that they wanted to interpret in the architecture of the design. I don't know the architect. I couldn't find out. But it's very interesting. It's a large church. It has an upper and a lower sanctuary, as well as I mentioned the school down the block and then the rectory behind it. So it's a wonderful outreach to the community, and it's right here on the busy Nostrand Avenue. And Nostrand Avenue is your commercial avenue, and you see the subway station is right here too. And within about a half hour, you can get into Lower Manhattan on the train. So this was built, this neighborhood, for people to be able to commute very easily by public transportation. And original transportation was back in the 1880s on Nostrand Avenue. There was a streetcar line that went over the Brooklyn Bridge. So this is one of the ways people got around by public transportation way back at the time when this neighborhood was first being developed, okay? So that's going to kind of end the tour, and it's kind of appropriate to end the tour with churches. They're indicative of a community and the stability of a community. Brooklyn is known as the city of churches, and you've just seen two of them now at the end of our tour. So I hope you had a good tour. You got a chance to see a lot of what was going on in this East Flatbush neighborhood. Beautiful houses, beautiful people, wonderful institutions, and there's a lot of wonderful things to explore as we continue. And it was great that the Historic Districts Council actually picked that East 25th Street block as one of their 6 to celebrate. And it was my pleasure to get to bring you to this neighborhood and to see a lot myself that I hadn't seen. It's a wonderful learning experience, as you all know, just to walk our great streets and neighborhoods. Thank you.